Imagine this, a powerful bishop, known for never backing down, suddenly puts his own son in the spotlight. Not politics, not culture wars. This time, it's family. Bishop Patrick Wooden's shocking public message has left supporters stunned, critics buzzing, and even in his own congregation asking, why would he go this far? What he said, and the way he said it, has sparked a firestorm across social media. And trust me, once you hear the details, you'll never look at him the same way again. And you won't believe the ripple effects this one statement has already set in motion. When we think about pastors and bishops, especially someone as widely respected as Bishop Patrick Wooden, we usually picture their words aimed at congregations, communities, or even the world at large. But rarely do we witness something so raw, so personal, and so unfiltered that it directly targets their own family in front of everyone. Yet, that's exactly what just happened. In today's video, we're diving into the powerful message Bishop Wooden recently delivered to his son. We'll break down exactly what he said, explore why he chose to make it so public, and uncover the reactions shaking both church circles and social media. Here's the twist. This wasn't just an offhand remark. It came with weight, intention, and timing that feels anything but accidental. Some are calling it a heartfelt act of fatherly guidance, while others insist it was a calculated move with layers of meaning beneath the surface. And by the time we're done, you'll not only know what was said, you'll understand the deeper implications behind it. Stick around, because when we unpack the circumstances that led up to this bold message, everything you thought you knew about it will shift. To really grasp the weight of Bishop Wooden's public message to his son, we need to step back and look at exactly who Bishop Patrick Wooden is and why his words land with such force inside and outside the church. Because let's be clear, this isn't just any pastor making a passing comment. This is a man whose very name has become linked with boldness, controversy, and an unshakable conviction. For decades, Bishop Wooden has served as the senior pastor of the Upper Room Church of God in Christ, guiding not just a congregation, but a movement. Under his leadership, the church hasn't only grown in numbers, it's expanded its influence far beyond the walls of Raleigh, North Carolina. He's known for fiery sermons, unfiltered honesty, and a refusal to bend under cultural pressure. Whether the topic is politics, morality, or social trends, Bishop Wooden doesn't hold back. His words have sparked countless debates, drawn both applause and criticism, and positioned him as one of the most uncompromising voices in modern ministry. And here's where it gets even more compelling. Bishop Wooden's reach doesn't stop with his church. His sermons and statements regularly circulate online, grabbing national attention and fueling conversations across the country. When he speaks, people listen even if they don't always agree. He has drawn harsh criticism from his detractors as well as fervent devotion from his followers. In other words, whether or not people agree with Bishop Wooden, they pay attention when he speaks. This is where things become particularly important when a man like Bishop Wooden, who has a history of attracting a lot of attention, decides to publicly address his own son rather than his congregation or society at large. It has an impact that extends well beyond a family gathering. We must wonder if this was just a parent giving advice and showing love in the way he knew best. Or was it a calculated action intended to send a message to his son and the world at large? As we proceed, we will begin to dissect this event, beginning with the precise message conveyed by Bishop Wooden. And believe me, you'll see why so many people are still talking about it after you hear the words for yourself. Let's move on to the main issue, which is Bishop Wooden's actual public statement to his son, because this is where the story really starts to take shape and where people start to disagree. Reports and first-hand sources state that Bishop Wooden did not call his son, send him a private note, or even have a family talk behind closed doors. No, he decided to use the pulpit, the exact spot where he has preached to his audience many times, as the platform for these remarks. Just that choice sparked curiosity. The majority of us envision family matters being kept confidential when we think about them. Bishop Wooden, however, took a very public stance. What did he say then? He spoke directly to his son from the pulpit, incorporating the lesson into a longer speech. He spoke with the authority of a bishop and the tenderness of a father. He reminded his son of the morals he had learned as a child, the importance of upholding the Wooden family name, and the faith he had been taught. Being the son of a well-known pastor, he wasn't afraid to draw attention to the difficulties, temptations, and decisions his son might have to make. Everyone's attention was drawn to one line in particular. Bishop Wooden said something like, "Son, You have a calling on your life in a moment that was both intensely private and unquestionably public. Don't let this world pull you away from who you were made to be, whether you embrace it or not. The message didn't end there. For some listeners, it was a heartfelt reminder of a father's concern. For others, it felt like a young man who might or might not share his father's beliefs was under an unusual amount of pressure. Bishop Wooden also talked about the significance of legacy, emphasizing that bearing the Wooden name was about furthering the moral and spiritual foundation that had been established over decades. Not just about family pride, he explained that his son's choices, whether positive or negative, would affect not only him personally, but also the church, the community, and the faith they both represent. This is the crucial moment that surprised the audience. Bishop Wooden's delivery, his tone made it clear that these were serious statements, and he wasn't soft-spoken or apologetic. He delivered the message with the same fierce passion he employs when speaking on national problems. There were immediate reactions. Some congregation members applauded, seeing the words as a potent example of tough love, while others sat silently, wondering if this was appropriate for such a public setting. This was deliberate, and it was intended to be heard, not only by his son, but also by everyone in the room and by everyone who would later watch clips of it online. Critics said that such a deeply personal message should never have been made public in the first place, while supporters praised him for being a brave father willing to guide his child openly. Naturally, the conversation erupted when the videos were posted to social media. But this is where it gets really interesting, and that leads us to our next section. What does this public message really mean? Was it directed solely at his son? Or was Bishop Wooden using this moment to send a broader message to the world? At first glance, this might seem like a straightforward story, but many believe the message was multi-layered, carrying implications not only for his son but for the entire younger generation sitting in the pews and watching online. A father who also happens to be a bishop used his pulpit to deliver a heartfelt message to his son. But if you have followed Bishop Wooden's ministry for any length of time, you are aware that his public statements are always accompanied by a larger context, a deeper meaning, and a bigger picture. Let's break it down. Bishop Wooden could have easily spoken to his son in private, choosing the intimacy of a father-son conversation at home, away from cameras, away from the church audience. This raises the question of whether the message was truly meant for his son or for a much wider audience. Second, let's look at the content. He chose the pulpit, the most prominent public stage in his world, and that choice alone indicates that the message was intended to reach beyond his son's ears. It was almost as if his son became the representative of a wider group of people, specifically the younger generation in the church. These are not casual dinner table conversations. Rather, they are messages that speak directly to the struggles of an entire generation navigating a world full of distractions, temptations, and cultural shifts. Bishop Wooden created a moment that felt personal, but was actually universal. By framing his words as though he was addressing his son, his words were weighty, full of reminders of responsibility, legacy, and calling. Every young person in that room and every viewer online could identify with his son. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Bishop Wooden is known for using his words strategically, and his sermons frequently contain incisive criticisms of contemporary culture, ranging from moral decay to political controversies. By picking this particular moment to speak to his son, he may have been doing more than just giving advice. In a culture where many criticize the breakdown of family structures, Bishop Wooden might have wanted to set an example for what it means for a father to stand up, speak truth, and guide his children, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's in the public eye. He might have been making a statement about fatherhood, about generational responsibility, and about the role of family in maintaining faith. But not everyone feels that way. Critics contend that this was more about control than guidance, and that placing his kid in such a public position could backfire and cause needless pressure, driving him farther away instead of closer. The message was multi-layered. On one level, it was a father talking to his son. Others believe it was a means for Bishop Wooden to strengthen his public image, not only as a pastor but also as a strong father figure, in line with the principles he preaches week after week. The timing was crucial. On a deeper level, it was a pastor addressing his congregation. On a broader level, it was a leader telling the world about what he feels is lacking in today's society. Fathers mentoring their sons, families holding each other accountable, and a generation being reminded of their identity. The timing of this message was probably influenced by certain events, cultural discussions, and current issues, and when you consider those variables, you start to see that this was not merely a fatherly piece of advice, but rather a well-crafted statement intended to create a stir. Because once you see the context, the entire story takes on a whole new dimension. In the next section, we will delve into that timing, asking why now, what was going on in the church, in the culture, and perhaps even in Bishop Wooden's personal life that prompted him to send this public message at this precise moment. If Bishop Patrick Wooden chose this time to send his son a public message, we must ask a straightforward but impactful question. Why now? Let's begin with the church context. In stories like this, timing is crucial. Words don't just come out of thin air, especially not from someone as thoughtful and strategic as Wooden. The Upper Room Church of God in Christ has been led by Bishop Wooden for many years, and he is intimately familiar with his congregation's needs, struggles, and doubts. Lately, there's been a growing national dialogue about the role of youth, and many pastors are concerned that the next generation may be drawn away from the church by secular values, social media, or modern culture. Then there's the cultural context. Perhaps Bishop Wooden used his son as a symbol, a living manifestation of that generational struggle. By speaking directly to his son, he wasn't just talking to one young man, but to all the young people in the room who might be facing similar difficulties. Bishop Wooden has always been outspoken about sticking to his convictions in the face of pressure, and by picking this particular moment to speak so candidly to his son, he may have been sending a subtle but firm message to the culture at large. In a world where scandals, controversies, and cultural changes dominate the headlines, public figures, especially faith leaders, are constantly scrutinized. This is how you lead your family. This is how you stand on values even when it's unpopular. In other words, his son was more than just his son at that time. He went on to become a symbol of resistance against cultural trends that Wooden believes are dangerous to faith and family. But it gets even more personal here. According to some insiders, the bishop may have acted because of recent developments in his son's life, choices, struggles, or crossroads. Another important factor to take into account is Bishop Wooden's own legacy. Leaders like him are not only thinking about today. He handled it quietly, but instead, he did what he always does. He turned the private into public, the personal into universal. To him, silence might have seemed like compromise, and compromise has never been part of his brand. Bishop Wooden may have been sowing seeds for the future by making his public remarks, making sure that his son and consequently the next generation understood the weight of responsibility that comes with their name. They are considering what will happen after they are gone, who will take up the mantle, who will safeguard the church's foundation and the family's reputation. Additionally, Wooden is aware that his pulpit is no longer confined to four walls, but rather is a global stage. So when he made this statement, he knew it would reverberate far beyond his sanctuary. Wooden also knows that a message delivered in a church today doesn't stay in church. It gets clipped, shared, and circulated across social media within hours. He wanted the world to hear it, which is why the timing is so important. But here's the twist. Some contend that this wasn't just about his son or even the younger generation, but rather about us, the audience, and the culture watching from the sidelines. Bishop Wooden may have used this father-to-child moment as a teaching tool, a dramatic illustration of what accountability looks like, what family leadership looks like, and what it means to hold the next generation to a higher standard. As powerful as Bishop Wooden's words were, the fallout both inside the church and online tells us just as much about the story as the message itself. But that begs the more important question: how did people react? Believe me, the responses range from heartfelt applause to outright outrage. In the following section, we will examine the response in detail, including the congregation's immediate reaction, the interpretation of social media, and, most importantly, the opinions of supporters and detractors regarding Bishop Patrick Wooden's decision to make such a private matter so public. When a public figure like Wooden takes a risk, the consequences are immediate. We need to examine three different arenas in order to fully comprehend the impact of his public message to his son: the church congregation, the larger faith community, and of course, the unforgiving world of social media. In this instance, the reactions were nothing short of explosive. Let's start with the congregation. As Bishop Wooden said those words, the church was electrified, with some members clapping loudly in agreement with what they perceived as a father's courage to speak truth, not only to his child but to everyone else in the room. You could see hands raised, heads nodding, and people standing. Though not everyone in the room shared this sentiment, a sizable section of the audience remained silent, and several appeared uneasy, shifting in their seats. For many, it was a welcome demonstration of honesty, and they were inspired by a leader who wasn't afraid to hold even his own family accountable. For them, this was less uplifting and more intrusive. Some whispered to one another in private, wondering if such a private message should be included in a public sermon. The conflicting responses within the church paved the way for a larger discussion after the video went viral online. Now, let's turn to the larger religious community. Pastors and church leaders all over the nation started to comment. His decision to speak so publicly, according to supporters, was a much-needed example in a world where too many fathers are silent about guiding their children. It showed strength, accountability, and transparency. Others criticized Bishop Wooden for going too far, while others praised him for his courage. Then came the social media storm, with clips of the message going viral on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube within hours. Critics said that this moment blurred the line between public performance and fatherly love, questioning whether his son's feelings had been taken into consideration and whether the pulpit should be used for such personal matters. This is what real fatherhood looks like, and we need more fathers willing to guide their boys like this. Supporters flooded comment sections with appreciation as hashtags started trending, with some people praising the bishop's position and others criticizing him for what they perceived to be needless public pressure. There was a clear divide between those who saw the message as a show of tough love, a demonstration of what it means to lead not just a church but a household, and those who saw it as a power move, a public spectacle at the expense of his son's privacy. Critics responded, saying, "This is toxic, this is emotional manipulation, and he could have said this in private." There were also innumerable onlookers who were merely enthralled with the drama and could not take their eyes off the controversy that was developing. However, this is where the reactions take on a deeper significance, as the discussion shifted from Bishop Wooden and his son to a more comprehensive discussion about parenting, faith, leadership, and generational accountability. The public message, whether you agree with it or not, had touched a nerve, and if we know anything about controversy, it doesn't end with the initial wave of reactions. People started sharing their own stories of fathers who never spoke to them, of families that were broken by silence, or of times when tough love changed their lives. As the conversation spreads, it grows, expands, and takes on new life, which leads us to the next important aspect of this story. What does this mean for Bishop Wooden's legacy, his image, and his relationship with his son going forward? Because while the immediate reactions are loud, the long-term effects often tell the bigger picture. The question on everyone's mind after the message was made public and reactions swept across social media, church walls, and faith circles was this: what happens now? Bishop Wooden's response was both predictable and complicated. On the one hand, his supporters came together more than ever to applaud his bravery and to reiterate their admiration for his leadership. Wooden's audacity strengthened his reputation as a man who never falters, even when it comes to his own family. In a world where pastors are frequently accused of being out of touch or overly preoccupied with political correctness. On the other hand, the controversy also provided his detractors with new fodder. This incident was a perfect fit for those who already saw him as too harsh, too outspoken, or too confrontational. They claimed that the bishop had gone too far in using his position to exercise authority over his son in a way that confused pastoral and personal roles, and that it was not an act of courage but rather an overreach. Naturally, the next question is about his son. Although a lot of people concentrated on Wooden's remarks, many others were curious about how his son felt about everything. Did he feel loved and guided, or did he feel exposed, under pressure, and perhaps even embarrassed? The truth is that only the son knows the whole answer. We can say, however, that being singled out so publicly, particularly by someone as powerful as Bishop Wooden, is certain to make an impression. For some sons, it may be a wake-up call, a moment that will be remembered for the rest of their lives as a turning point. For others, It may cause resentment, distance, or a feeling that a parent's legacy is more important than their own. Whether this is viewed as a shining example of fatherhood or a troubling display of control, the fact remains that it will be remembered when people talk about Bishop Wood in years to come. And that brings us to the legacy question. Bishop Wooden has spent decades establishing his reputation as a fearless, uncompromising voice in the church world. This moment adds yet another chapter to that story. The ramifications of this moment are multi-layered, and for Wooden, it furthers his reputation as a man who isn't afraid to make bold statements. This message to his son will be part of the conversation, and it may encourage some to be bolder with their own families while reminding others of the dangers of blending personal relationships with public platforms. For his followers, it serves as a source of motivation and discussion. For his detractors, it affirms their worries. And for his son, it is a turning point that may influence not just his connection with his father, but also his perspective on faith, family, and leadership.